48,000 women went on a low-calorie diet and were tracked for 7 full years. 7 years, so this had to work, right? It turns out these women, at the end of the study, hadn't even lost a single pound. Not one. After 7 years. You may very well lose a little bit of weight when you first start a diet, but then you hit a plateau. Everyone's experienced this. You won't be able to sustain the rate of weight loss you had in the beginning, and here's why. There are 3 laws of fat loss, 3 macro steps you have to take to lose weight and keep it off long term. Before you can even begin to burn body fat, you have to address your metabolism and your hormones. They are the foundation. If they're ignored, unstable, or out of whack in any way, you will not have success for long, and that's the problem with dieting. Hormones go crazy when you diet, and very quickly your metabolism crashes. You feel ravenous all the time, and your body ramps up all its fat storage processes to 11, desperate to cling to every calorie you give it. This is not a willpower issue. The problem is that diets ignore the first 2 laws of fat loss. Instead of honoring these laws, dieting invokes the law of diminishing returns, and that's why you plateau. The crime, though, is that diets actually appear to be working in the short term, so when they stop working, we blame the victim. We say they didn't stick with it. They lacked willpower. They gave up. But the truth is, every hormone in their bodies started working against them. They really were more likely to store fat, more likely to gain weight, had higher ghrelin and other appetite hormones begging them to eat. They were hungrier than their skinny friends. Diets disrupt hormones, so it's harder to lose weight, and destroy metabolism, so it's almost impossible to keep any weight off. In the weeks and months after a diet, all the studies show this. People gain all that weight back and then some. There's a reason they're called yo-yos. In this study, published in 1919, a century ago, patients decreased the amount of food they ate by 30%, and over time their metabolisms also dropped by 30%. Ancel Keys published The Biology of Human Starvation in 1950. He reduced calories for patients by 30 to 40%, and again, resting metabolic rates decreased by 30 to 40%. And these people were still eating over 1,500 calories per day. The Biology of Human Starvation, it's called, at 1,500 calories per day. That's essentially a modern diet, no? How little we've learned. Let's talk about something more recent, from 1995. In this study, researchers took patients with stable weights and overfed them until they gained 10% of their starting weights. Doing this actually increased their basal metabolisms by close to 500 calories per day. Now that's interesting. But then, these same patients were underfed until they dropped 10% below their starting weights. And of course, metabolisms crashed. There are countless other studies exactly like this, and they all show the same thing. Metabolism is not constant. Metabolism is not a scale. That's the wrong analogy. A better one would be a thermostat. We're not breaking any laws of thermodynamics here, but when you undereat, your body simply runs colder to conserve energy. And when you eat more, you turn the heat back up. So eating less because you want to lose weight is like putting out the fire to stay warm. It actually works against the goal. It makes it harder and harder to keep any of that weight off with each passing day. Eating less is not the answer. It's usually around this time that people ask, surely our bodies eventually adjust to this. Once a body has enough time to get used to a new weight, it'll stabilize, right? Metabolism won't stay that low forever. Eventually it has to jump back up, right? That's not what happens. I wish it was. But this study followed patients as they first lost 10% of their body weights, and like always, BMR quickly dropped by about 400 calories per day. But then, these patients stuck to their diets and kept all that weight off for an entire year. Sounds great, right? Except their metabolisms never recovered. Even after a year, metabolism didn't increase. And the exact same thing happened in this study by the Women's Health Initiative. But this wasn't just a one-year study. 48,000 women went on a low-calorie diet and were tracked for 7 full years. 7 years, so this had to work, right? It turns out these women, at the end of the study, hadn't even lost a single pound. Not one. After 7 years. And by now, you know exactly why. They initially dropped a couple pounds, but yo-yoed right back. And after that, hovered right around the starting weights from before the study even began. And the worst part? They were still on the diet. They were still eating less. They lost the weight and gained it all back, the whole time sticking to the diet. And now, they couldn't come off. They were stuck. Their metabolisms had been destroyed. So if they ever went back to eating a normal amount of food, the same amount of food they'd been eating before the study, they would gain weight like crazy, weight they never carried before. Dieting didn't help at all. All it did was trap them in perpetual starvation. And that's when it hit me. The epiphany. We cannot expect to sustain fat loss by triggering our body's starvation defenses. I mean, that's so obvious. That's so obviously true. And it's why diets and calorie cutting don't work. Your body is smart. It's just too smart for diets. It knows if it continued burning energy at the old rate, it would literally eat itself to death, but it realizes this. It realizes it's being starved and fights against starvation every step of the way, and thank God it does. Diets don't just fail because you don't stick to them. Diets are going to fail even if you stick to them. Every diet is a yo-yo diet.